So for those of you in the room here, how many of you saw that video when it came out in April? It was very early on in the pandemic, and I interviewed Darius Lim, the artistic director of Voices of Singapore, and I wanted to find out how he made it. And it was a monumental task. It involved more than 900 singers, and clearly the production of it. And so let's meet the woman who made this project fly with the support of the Singapore Tourism Board. Very pleased to have with us Lynette Pang, Assistant Chief Executive Marketing Group for the Singapore Tourism Board. Lynette, please. Are you feeling all choked up?
Slightly. Hello, good evening, Siew, Hoon.
Good evening,
Very
all right.
warm hello to everybody out there. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, and yeah, it's such a pleasure, really.
These chairs are quite a mountain to climb.
I know, right? So, it reminds me of the journey that WiT has been on, right? Because it's been really a mountainous road trip. But, there's a saying that charity begins at home, right? And for Singapore tourism, it really has been survival begins at home, right?
Yes.
So if I were to ask you, for the past 18 months, 4 words to describe the past 18 months for you and your team at STB.
Wow, 4 words. I would say it's been really difficult and hard.
It's been really difficult and hard. Okay, 5. We'll give you
Almost.
that. Okay. But what was one old mindset that that you had to throw away, as a result of this?
It's been really difficult and hard because, as you know, last year, our visitor arrivals fell by 85%. So in this new world where things change, well, literally every minute there'll be something new, we've had to really be fast and quick and agile. So I would say that one thing that we had to discard or put aside was really the quest for perfection. As you would know, in big organizations like the Singapore Tourism Board, getting things done perfectly is critical. So that was a tough paradigm to let go and to really go for speed versus perfection.
Right. I mean, what I find really amazing, right, is that you really went from an outward-facing tourism board, your markets are global, and suddenly all you're left is the home market. But I want to say congratulations to you, because in June this year, Campaign Asia Pacific recognized you among the top 50 most influential and purposeful marketers, and really citing your efforts to keep Singapore top of mind in international markets. So I think that's a great accolade, But let's focus on the domestic, because as you say, every place had to turn inwards. And I just want to share a parallel with what happened in Prague, because Prague introduced something called Prague Unlocked to pump up domestic travel. They were usually at 15% domestic, but during the summer campaign, the number of summer travelers rose by 16%. So what did you do to pump up the domestic market, and what were the numbers like?
Well, if you look at 2020, when our visitor arrivals fell by more than 85%, you're really looking at the previous year high of more than 19 million to about 2.7 million. So it was drastic, more than 85%. So what we really had to do was, how can we actually support the local industry? How can we get Singaporeans, who are Singapore's toughest critics, and in a way, and I'm sure you've heard of this idiom, to sell ice to the Eskimos, right? And so, we got down to it, and we launched a campaign called Singapore Rediscovers. And with that, it was really difficult, because we had to sit down and think about, what would be the elements and what would be the experiences and what would be the hindrances that we would have to work with. And we're very glad that we had great partners who came on the journey with us, the Enterprise Singapore, because they take care of companies and businesses in Singapore, and Sentosa, who's a very key tourism partner. There were a couple of things we really focused on. One was really about rediscovering things that they might not have seen before in Singapore. Generally, Singaporeans are very well traveled, and there were many things about their own backyard that they've not been to. And it was also about exploring beyond the city center to explore the greater Singapore, the smaller precincts.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we found out in our discussions with some of our online travel partners was in a lot of searches and a lot of bookings, Singaporeans were going away and discovering the smaller islands, which are usually not something that they would do. So it was a great experience, and I would say, hand to heart, I sincerely hope that Singaporeans have discovered Singapore and that they've fallen in love all over again with the country. And when borders open, they will talk about this to the world.
Yeah, and also maybe it's created a new domestic market, right, which you didn't think before. Do you think did it exceed expectations? Like what are the numbers like for Singapore Rediscover?
I would say we would look at it from two perspectives, right? We had the campaign Singapore Rediscovers, as well as the tourism vouchers and credits that we gave to every Singaporean. I would look at it from two lenses. One would be, we are very glad that we did it because I think it galvanized and encouraged Singapore in a way to discover Singapore and to give back to local businesses and to support local businesses. So on that front, and if you look at the conversations on social, the advocacy going on, oh my goodness, I didn't know we had that, I would say on that front, it has been fairly successful. On the other front, with regards to the tourism vouchers, unfortunately, in the spend of launching the vouchers, we've actually had a couple of setbacks in terms of greater restrictions. So, well, we seem to be getting out of that. Things are opening up. So I do hope that the take-up of the vouchers will increase.
Right, but I think we've had enough of staying home, right? So, we're hopefully going to see the restart of inbound, and now with the vaccinated travel lanes, that we can actually also travel out. So for the first time, we have two-way quarantine-free travel to Germany from September 8th and Brunei, and then unilateral opening to visitors from Hong Kong and Macau. So looking at Germany, if you are promoting to Germany now, what will you do differently promoting to the German market versus what you were doing pre-COVID?
Well, I would say generally across the board, if you look at consumer habits and insights and needs, clearly COVID has really catalyzed significant shifts, right? I think people are more careful and they would think and plan a lot more in advance. And of course, given the long period in which many of us were not able to travel when we can, and having saved up significant monies for that big trip, you will plan it carefully. It would be a longer trip, and clearly with the various, I would say, I wouldn't say barriers, but the various things that you need to do. Make sure you're vaccinated, you've got to plan your trip well, make sure you've done all the tests, so on and so forth. So
there's still a lot of hurdles.
Yes, there are still a lot of
travel,
hurdles,
right?
yes.
So I understand that before that, the German market used to like to come to Singapore and then they'll go on a regional cruise and then come back, right? And clearly that is still, we only have the cruises to nowhere. So where are you putting your marketing dollars? Like where are you betting on recovery? You must know something that we don't, right? So where are you putting your marketing dollars and ready for the recovery?
I would say that, we are really looking at, well, first of all, we never stopped marketing, right?
Okay.
We've never stopped marketing. In fact, I would say we changed how we did our marketing. So when you look at travel destination marketing, that's sort of two buckets or two ways in which you would approach it. One, of course, would be you need to build brand awareness, you need to change perceptions, you need to drive consideration, right? The other part of destination marketing is really about driving considerations, research, and bookings. So I would say the past year and a half has really been about keeping Singapore top of mind. But I think the switch now, as more markets open, would be how can we work more with a lot of the travel intermediaries? How can we work with airlines to really drive consumers down the funnel to do the booking? So in terms of what would change, you've asked for the German market, it would be really, we will be ramping up and working with intermediaries because now you can travel.
Okay, so more focus on the transaction and the ability to actually
So
just
it'll be the
book
full
something.
funnel marketing from branding and awareness all the way to bookings. But to answer your question earlier, I would say one of the key shifts would be better planning, and we anticipate and hope that visitors would stay longer, which means that how we talk about Singapore, it's got to be more extensive in greater depth. Singapore is a destination that goes beyond 3 days, is a destination for 5 days, and Singapore is far larger than you thought it was.
Yeah, I suppose, and with the long haul market, I think people will want to stay longer. For example, I'm planning a trip right now to Bavaria, right? And I would,
Nice.
and say, okay, I need to stay at least 7 to 14 days to kind of make it worth my while with all the testing that I have to do. Now, I want to just ask the people in the audience here. I mean, you have my number, right? Most of you. So if you have any questions you want me to ask Lynette, you can actually WhatsApp me. Is that okay, Lynette?
Absolutely.
All right, okay. So, I mean, many things have been accelerated because of COVID, right? We talk about e-commerce, digitization, contactless tech, right? What two marketing trends have been accelerated because of COVID that you're most excited about?
I
That
think
will change destination marketing.
one major thing that has been talked about by many marketeers that has really, it's going to be accelerated because of COVID, where I think travel is going to be more bespoke, smaller, more careful. And also if you look at how humans and all of us are interacting with technology, where technology is very responsive, right, is really about personalization. In the past, marketing, if you look at a lot of destination marketing, and if you also look at how destinations were targeting audiences, a lot of it was really about a volume-based game. It was really about, very blunt tools, reaching out to as many people as possible. It was really about reach. But I think increasingly so, it's really about that one-to-one conversation, knowing what you like and adjusting the itineraries on an app or across the digital journey to your needs, having listened to you and having engaged with you through many different platforms.
Okay.
So that would be definitely one big trend. The other one really is sustainability. I think what has really come to the fore with COVID and with a lot of the dramatic climate changes in the past year and a half, it has really sensitized all of us to the fragility of the planet, and that each one of us has a role to play. And each one of us can do something, and people are demanding for corporates to do something about it, and destinations as well. So that's definitely an area that Singapore has always believed in. We are a green city, we have a green plan, and from a tourism board perspective, this is an area that we're walking very carefully into. We're going to be investing significantly in this area.
Okay, so we have a question here. Which international markets are likely to open next for Singapore inbound?
That's the million-dollar question. If I knew this, I wouldn't be seated here. Well, I can't predict what the markets are going to be, but I can perhaps talk a little bit about the considerations. I think definitely there are two key elements or principles that will guide the markets that will open up for travel. One clearly would be the rate of vaccination. The other one clearly would be how the country manages COVID in their own markets. And that would have a bearing on, I guess, the opening up the markets either way.
Okay, so having said that, I guess most of Southeast Asia, which is like the majority of our market, is pretty no-go for the rest of this year. And maybe we can think about that next year, right?
But I have to say with COVID, even if a market opens up, things change drastically by the minute.
Yes.
So I think one of the things
Absolutely.
you've asked me about that we need to take note of is to really to be able to pivot fast and to be agile and to have many drawer plans.
Yeah, I've heard about all these drawer plans
Yes.
everywhere. It's like, okay, drawer 8 here. All right, we have another question. What have we done differently? What will we do differently post-pandemic to position Singapore better for global travel recovery?
What would we do?
What have we done differently post-pandemic? What have we done differently to position Singapore better for global travel recovery?
I think there are a couple of things, and I wouldn't say they're about marketing. One thing that at the tourism board that we are very proud of is really how the industry, they really rallied together to change things and to think about solutions for their industry. One area in the very early part of the pandemic was really about cleanliness, was about hygiene, was about sanitation, and another big area is really around the adoption of technology. Technology clearly is going to be an area in which Singapore will be investing significantly in. We have invested significantly in, and it's an area that we'll do even more in.
Okay.
One of the themes that we are focusing on moving ahead is really the theme of reimagination. It's something that we, as a country with very little resources, have called upon to be who we are. It's something that during COVID, I've seen and we've seen many stakeholders really reimagine what their business model can be, how their workforce can look like, what's the experience they can deliver. So I think really moving ahead is this power of, I guess, the industry and of Singaporeans to really rethink paradigms, whether it's in terms of experience, whether it's in terms of adopting a new way of sustainable practices in tourism, or how can they use technology to deliver not just back of house, but also front of house experiences. So those are areas that I think we'll be investing significantly in to really differentiate Singapore.
Right, and definitely there's been incredible collaboration and partnership, right? But, let's talk about reimagining the urban experience, right? Because one of the key traveler trends is like, I want to go remote, I want to go nature, I want to go camper vans, there's not much that Singapore can do in this area. And I want to quote a Bloomberg article that was titled, "After a Year of Rowdy Tourists, European cities want to keep it that way," about places like Amsterdam and Barcelona. And there was a quote by somebody, and it said, "When I visit New York, I'm interested in what New Yorkers do. It is much better to have a tourist model linked to culture or science because it means that there is a connection with the residents." So it's an opportunity to reimagine urban tourism. So tell us about how you're thinking. And you worked in the music industry, you are very deeply involved with the arts. So are we going to see Singapore move that way as well?
I love this quote, culture and science and connection to the resident. And it's really about being authentic to the destination. It's not just about traveling to a place and ticking off, top 10 attractions and must-dos. I think increasingly so, travel is really about getting a sense of how people live, a sense of realness. I think that's what travelers are looking for these days. And luckily for us, this has been a shift that's been a long time in the making, and it's not something that we've only done in the past year. It's something that we've done, I would say, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when we really reviewed some of our strategies, and one of them was really about being authentic and embracing local, right? Whether it's local culture, whether it's local food, local handmade products, local experiences, and local talent. And I think with, the lockdown, Singaporeans have been very busy making things, creating experiences, and appreciating local. So I'm really looking forward to really opening the borders and for travelers to see all the new, authentic, local cultural experiences, whether it's about dining, whether it's eating or shopping.
Yeah, there's been such a slew of local experiences. So, but we have another question again, and it's going to require you to put the crystal ball on because that's what people seem to want to ask is, when do you think we'll see Chinese leisure travelers back in Singapore again? Actually, can the world live without Chinese travel, you think?
The world can't live without travelers. Definitely not
Okay,
Singapore.
all right.
It makes life meaningful. I would say perhaps I can review and pivot that question a little bit. I think how we are looking at travel opening up, we are looking at 2 stages. The first stage, which would be definitely in the short to mid-term, where it's really going to be about individual markets opening up. And likewise, from us in terms of our execution and our tactics, it's going to be very localized and market by market. There will come a tipping point where, you will have the majority of the world where they've managed the pandemic in their own markets is well under control. You have a significant percentage of their domestic audience vaccinated, and that's where you will see mass, well, perhaps the word mass is not a good one, where you see significant borders and travel opening up. So that's really another phase that we have in our travel drawer plans, and that we hope it's going to be sometime soon, perhaps next year.
Okay. All right. So, marketing is, like for here, what we're doing is Singapore needs to live on a hybrid, right? While we wait for the world to return. And so we have to, like, we have a very small physical audience here, but then we sort of stream virtually. How do you see selling Singapore in such a hybrid environment? How do you marry that physical with the virtual when while we wait for the pandemic to go away?
I think it's very exciting. I think what this has done is it has really opened up opportunities for not just Singapore, but for every destination across the world. From the littlest town, these days, with the technology that we have, you're able to speak to the world. One of the things that travel marketing and destination marketing can't do, unlike, let's say, a product, is we are not able to bring, well, in the traditional sense, we are not able to bring Singapore to the doorstep of my market across the world. But with technology and with the digital world, now we can. And it's been really interesting and fun and an exciting ride that the tourism board, together with our stakeholders, we've had, and you were part of it, which was, if you look at leisure events, you look at MICE events, what's been interesting has been the push and the question on how can we deliver this online? Can we have a food festival, which is really, it's very visceral, it's tangible, it's about eating. Can we think about working with food delivery companies across the world to deliver Singapore flavors? Can we break down the creation process and work with chefs across the world, work with delivery companies across the world to deliver the Singapore food experience? Can we also, and this was something that's been done, can we actually have live tours on demand where the consumer on the other side of the world is giving instructions and demanding to go to certain places? So today, I think what I can say is we can bring Singapore across the world. And there was some resistance to this pre-COVID because it was not necessary.
Right.
The business model was not broke. But then in the last 2 years, there's been an acceleration of it, and I actually think it opens up new business opportunities.
Absolutely, I think, and actually I was reading that, the live streaming of the panda baby, our new panda baby, like, the live streaming, people are just flocking to look at this cute little panda baby in Singapore. So before they would not have been able to do that. So
in the short term, it's really about building awareness and engagement with audiences for your brand. But I think in the mid to long term, businesses will find ways to monetize it, and then it will become a more viable
Okay, so we're going to wrap up with rapid fire, all right? So what has this period of no travel reinforced about travel for you?
Oh, we need it.
What have you learned about your two sons during this period?
They're very, very different.
They are very, very different. Okay.
Chalk and cheese.
What have they learned about you?
That I am Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
All right.
Don't mess with me.
One destination that has done a good job making you yearn to travel there as soon as you can.
Italy.
Italy.
The product is amazing, the culture is amazing, the art, the culture, the people, the food, and the way they tell the stories and the people.
One piece of advice that you'd like to give travel marketers out there, whether they're in Singapore and anywhere else, about destination marketing right now?
Be true to yourself and be fast.
Be true to yourself and be fast. Well, you heard it here at WiT. Thank you, Lynette, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.